Good morning. This is Zoe Routh, and this is the Leadership Lab webinar. And we are focusing on true grit today. Climb and grind out of that hole. So, Leadership Lab series is where we explore the edgy side of leadership, what matters and what makes a difference. So, it's all practical and it's all about the tough stuff for sure. We are recording and it will be published on YouTube, and we'll go for about 15 to 30 minutes. If you've got any questions or comments, type them in the chat box. I'll do my best to keep an eyeball on that as we go through the content for today. Alrighty, so what is true grit? And I think that's a good question. If we think about somebody that I think has true grit, and I think she is quite a remarkable lady. I saw her speak at the Business Chicks breakfast about a month or so ago. Her name is Turia Pitt. And on the slide is a picture of her. If you think she looks a little bit funny, well, she does. She is a true survivor. She had this horrific experience where she was an ultramarathon runner in Alice Springs, lined up to do a 100K run through the desert. Pretty tough already. Tough, not already. But what happened is that during that run, her and about 5 other participants got caught in a canyon, and a huge bushfire swept through the canyon and they were trapped. And she received burns to 65% of her body. Didn't think that she was going to survive. The doctor had never had a patient survive who had been burnt that badly. I think she spent a month in a coma just because of the horrific pain. Since then, she's had, I think it was 5 years ago, she's had over 200 medical procedures to do skin grafts, to blood transfusions, you name it, to try and keep her alive and get her fixed up as best that she could be. And she survived all that. She survived I think her heart stopped 3 times on the operating table, and she came back. Even on another surgery that she had later, where they took some bone from her forehead to create a nose for her. She almost lost her life again on that operating table. So she's been through the ringer. She had to learn how to walk. She had fingers amputated. You name it. She's had some tough times. And you know what she does now? Oh, well, she's an inspirational speaker. She's got a book out. She runs a foundation that gives money to burn victims overseas, and she tours the world stage. Yeah. Makes you kind of think that you're a little bit inadequate. And I think that's the ironic thing about inspirational speakers. They are truly inspiring. And I think if you do the comparison game, you kind of feel a little bit crap at the same time, because you think she's had so much to contend with and she's achieved so much. What have I done? Anyway, that pity party doesn't serve us at all any good. So let's take what's valuable from Turia Pitt's example and her fabulous story. And the questions that I come up with when I think about someone like Turia is, what makes that kind of inner resolve? Any of us sitting in her position would be devastated, I'm sure, at the loss of so much of who she was, of her looks, of her abilities, etc. Oh, by the way, she's now training for an Ironman. She's probably run it by now. So this woman she is an iron woman, that is for sure. So what does it take to survive an ordeal like that? And do we have it? Do we naturally have it within us, or can it be cultivated? I believe we can absolutely cultivate this true grit. It's not bestowed on the chosen few. It is something that can be grown, etc. And I think her background as an elite athlete, a hardcore elite athlete who does ultra marathons in the desert, like whoever signs up to do that stuff, is kind of nuts, I'm sure, but also has this huge inner resilience and go-gettedness about it. I guess some other examples would be Lance Armstrong. Well, let's just put aside the whole drug cheating thing, okay? I know that's not a good morally, ethically thing, but the fact remains he had pretty bad cancer. He had brain cancer, lung cancer, and testicular cancer. He had an intense regime of chemotherapy and treatment in 1996 when the drugs were pretty harsh then. And he came back and he thumped his way through 7 Tour de France's to win them. Yes, amplified with some drug cheating. However, it doesn't matter what kind of drugs you're on, you still got to climb up those mountains. And that's tough yards. So he's another example of someone who's got outrageous focus and determination. I guess on a less extreme, less global platform, I've got me in my personal experience. I run marathons slowly. I've been through cancer in 2005. And I think what helped me get through that, both those experiences, both running marathons and surviving cancer and even building a practice, is the development of this true grit. So how do we do it? And I think it's, when I'm thinking about this, I think about my own personal experience. And one of the foundational pieces that I had in my life experience is working at Outward Bound. And interestingly enough, the whole concept of Outward Bound evolved out of the Second World War when Lawrence Holt, who was the owner of the Blue Funnel shipping line, noticed that his young sailors, when his boats were getting bombed by the Germans and the sailors hopped into the U-boats or into the lifeboats to get saved, he noticed that the young sailors would just keel over and die. And the old crusty sailors, they were the ones who would survive. And he wondered why. Why is it the crusty old ones survived and why the young ones gave up, essentially? So he spoke to his buddy Kurt Hahn, who was a Jewish educator who had fled Germany at the time of the war. And he said, "Why is it so, Kurt?" And Kurt said, "It is because the older sailors have been through a lot already. They've got a lot of previous life experiences on which to draw a sense of, we'll get through this, a sense of resilience." So the two of them concocted an idea to give the young sailors an intense life experience so that they would have something to draw on if they were to get thrown into lifeboats once again, which is a pretty adverse circumstance you can imagine. And that was the birth of Outward Bound internationally. It started in Wales and Abu Dhabi. And it was a 30-day program. And they took these young sailors and they put them through their paces. They gave them minimal resources, so they had to develop initiative. They had tough physical challenges, so they had to learn how to develop stamina and resilience and physicality. And the whole thing evolved from there. So Outward Bound is definitely about learning by doing with reflection. And the whole idea about going through difficult experiences is that you can learn something from it and learn something about yourself. And that was 10 years part of my life. And before that, I did led canoe trips with a similar philosophy. You go through these intense experiences in order to learn something about yourself and how to get along with others, which serves you well in times of crisis when you need that kind of true grit. Another organization that knows how to develop true grit is the Navy SEALs. And they form these types of intense rites of passage. I'm fascinated by the Navy SEALs because these guys are elite warriors. And you have to overcome so much of your own natural boundaries or limits in order to do these incredible feats of endurance and focus in the most extreme of circumstances, like people shooting at you and wartime operations. Not that I ever want to go into war. However, I am fascinated by what it takes to be able to sit centered in true chaos and have that true grit. And if you read any of Mark Devine's books, which I highly recommend because they're applicable even if you don't want to be an extreme athlete or if you don't want to become a Navy SEAL, they still show you the discipline of spirit, mind, and body of extreme focus that you can apply to resilience in business, resilience in your personal life, and resilience in your emotional life as well. And I've cited Mark's work in my first book, Composure, and I think it's extraordinary. So the book I'm looking at the moment right now is called The Way of the SEAL by Mark Devine, and his other book, one of his first ones, was called Unbeatable Mind. And he actually trains Navy SEAL applicants. So he teaches people to develop the inner resilience, the true grit that's required to undergo these extreme, first of all, rites of passage to get into the Navy SEALs, which is known as Hell Week, where they put you through really crazy physical feats. So they have a morning PT called the Grinder every morning, which is just intense physicality. And they yell at you and they spray you with cold water just to amp it up a little. They have you carry things like these big logs, which is in the slide deck there. And they have you sit in the cold ocean water for hours on end to see how far you can go. And it's not necessarily about physical resilience as much as it is about inner resolve, which is the true grit piece. So I love these ideas about disciplining spirit, mind, and body in order to prepare you for difficult circumstance, which is what the Navy SEALs does. And that's what Outward Bound does to a certain extent, but to a lot lesser, harsh extent nowadays. It was more its origins that sort of focused on that. So let's talk about the kinds of crucibles that we can experience. What kind of rough times can we expect and where we need true grit? There's the personal ones, which might be some loss of somebody you care about, loss of a job, a death in the family, divorce. All these are kind of like cliff line experience where you feel like you're on the edge, leaning over a chasm because of what's just suddenly dropped out of your life. That's one type of crucible experience where you need that true grit to get through it all. Another one is a threshold kind of crucible. Thresholds are unknown. They're like learning new things, getting into a new job, or traveling. And these are about horizon crucibles, where you stand on the edge of something new, like Frodo and Sam did at the edge of the Shire, and go, wow, never been beyond here, what's next? And that requires a sense of gumption and grit to get going, to move through that. And the third type of crucible is battle, where you confronted with a complex, challenging mess with other people, and we are the steward for the group, and we've got to lead them through that. And it's like you're stuck in a pit with your colleagues, with your mates, with your family, and you've got to get them out of that. And that requires a sense of grit and focus to help other people as well as yourself get on and get out. All right, so let's get into it. How do we actually get grit and prepare for a crucible? Here's a little crucible. I love this image. It's a fireball. And if you notice, the man is wearing, excuse me, he's wearing a very intense heat-proof suit in this image. And that's because he doesn't want to be turned into muck by stepping into the fire. And it's a great image for what a crucible does, because if you did step into that, you'd be burnt alive. But the whole idea of a crucible, metaphorically, is that you go through extreme pressures, you survive it, and you are transformed by it. So you don't get destroyed by it, you get transformed. So how do we actually create our own crucible experiences? You need true grit projects. So if you're not going to go and try out for the Navy SEALs, or if you don't want to do a hardcore extreme Outward Bound program, you can actually tailor this on mini scales to develop the same kind of results. There's a couple of things that you need. The true grit projects need to be hard. So it's not like, I think I'll just learn how to knit. That is not a true grit project, okay? Unless you have no hands. If you have no hands, then that is a true grit project, learning how to knit. However, for most of us with hands, that is not hard. So the next one, you need to have an element of fear and trepidation around it. So it's got to rattle your cage a little bit. It's got to feel like, ooh, I don't know. Can I do it? And there's this question about it. Related to that is that failure is definitely a possibility. So maybe as you set out to, well, I'll just use the marathon example, run a marathon. If you've never run a marathon, you've never run more than 5K in your life, running 42.2 Ks sounds very long, and it is. Can you make it? Well, if you don't, you've never tried it, so you don't know. There is a failure possibility there, and it can also be scary. With that, the outcome is uncertain. Don't know if I can do it, don't know if something will happen during the training of that. I don't know, but uncertainty is key. So what happens with uncertainty is it puts us into a state of disequilibrium, i.e. we are off balance. And when we are off balance, we need to develop new skills, new muscles, new approaches to get back on balance. That is the essence of developing true grit, is we have to do something new in order to develop new stability. It's what we do when we go to the gym. We put our muscles into turbulence and disequilibrium so that they can repair and grow stronger. Well, we're doing that with our spirit in true grit projects. It needs to be a test of spirit, a test of resolve, a test of strength perhaps. And you need to ask yourself through the true grit project, who am I? Who am I redefining myself as with this true grit project? All right, so how do we design a crucible? So you set yourself a little project. You need to start by completing the sentence. I could never fill in the blank. I could never, fill in the blank is not the thing that you need to not do, but I could never accomplish that particular adventure. Maybe it's a physical thing like climbing a mountain or asking someone out on a date or sing in public. I don't know, but it's got to start with that. I could never do blah, 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 blah. Then you need to assess the opportunity with, do I want to? Why or why not? So if we take let's sing in public, I could never sing in public. So for me, I could never sing in public and make it sound nice. Is the caveat that I'm happy to sing in public, but I really let it go and know that it'll sound like I'm singing country music instead of the tune that's meant to sing out. So I can never do that, sing in public and have it sound really elegant like an opera singer. The next question I said, well, so that is possibility for me to have a Crucible grit project right there. However, with the next question, do I want to do it? Why not? Do I want to sing like an opera singer in public? Nope, I don't. It's got nothing to do with my personal agenda, my personal mission, and my contribution to the world. So it's not really in line with my values and my purpose. So it's got to be in line with values and purpose to make it meaningful. Otherwise, why would you bother? My first marathon, that was a really important goal for me because I'd set that as a child. I said, as I watched my dad run marathons, I'm like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon by the time I'm 30. So when you're 10, 30 is like forever away. And then I turned 30, I still hadn't done it. I went, you know what? I got to do it this year. So because I made a commitment to myself, and that was an important reason for me, that I'd set this as an agenda for me to become this person who could run marathons. And darn it, I was going to do it within my own self-imposed deadline. So it was about proving to myself that I had the capacity to do something that huge and to honor my commitment. So it had some really deep personal significance to me. The next question to ask yourself when you're considering a true grit project, ask, will it help me feel better, be more confident, connect better with others, discover new thresholds, help other people? So those are the set of questions. So will it help me feel better, be more confident, connect better with others, discover new thresholds, or help others? So the singing in public one, couldn't say yes to any of those really. However, the marathon piece did work for me. The next one you want to next question to assess your true grit project with, does it pass the back of the neck tingle test? I love that one. So do you feel a little bit tingly when you think about this true grit project? Like, ooh, which means that it's in alignment with what your purpose and goals are all about. And the last question to assess your true grit project is, do I have to redefine who I am through this crucible? When I ran my first marathon, I definitely had to redefine who I am, who I was. I was someone who would honor commitments to myself. I was someone who had determination enough to follow through and do this epic project. So for me, it was redefining who I was with that. So those are your criteria for how to design your own crucible to help you personally transform. There's a couple of different types of projects. Hang on, I've lost control of my computer here. We'll get to those in just a second, but first of all, I want to show you this little slide here. Ernest Shackleton advertisement. So Ernest Shackleton, famous adventurer, explorer, wanted to take a group of people to Antarctica. And this is his advertising to get people to come on board with him. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton. Now, who answers an ad like that, right? It sounds like, crucible, 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 you may die. At the end, you may get honor and recognition. So it's really calling on adventure, putting yourself out there on the edge. And what happened with Shackleton is a fabulous story. Read about it. It's amazing. He took his crew down there. His boat got stuck in the ice. They had to escape the boat before it got crushed by the ice. They spent a long time on this tiny little island. And then he took a small rescue crew in the boat, paddled like huge distance, 500 kilometers, something like that, to the nearest southern station, then hiked miraculously over the island to get to the community, which saved his men. No one died. Amazing story. Well worth a read. In any case, I wanted to point out how you would describe a crucible experience of extreme sorts. And I reckon all the guys who lived through that experience had true grit as a result, if not before. So let's talk about these types of true grit experiences, whether you want to do an Ernest Shackleton craziness or something more contained. There's 3 types of true grit projects: physical, mental, and emotional. So physical ones are the ones that we typically point to the most because they're the most obvious. So it could be run a marathon, could be climb a mountain, go, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, do a long run, do an epic swim, learn to belly dance if you don't want something so difficult physically. And that can be quite intimidating as well. So the cognitive or mental ones are examples like write a book, learn a new skill, or learn a new language. Those are really good cognitive true grit projects. And then there's the emotional ones. Things like forgive everyone in your life who has ever hurt you. Now, forgiving doesn't mean condoning. It means letting go of the past so that it no longer affects you. That actually takes courage because we hang on to our stories of feeling like a victim because it makes us feel, vindicated, powerful, something. It becomes part of our story. But when we decide we don't want that to be part of our story, that we want our story to be one of self-authoring as opposed to responding to what people do to us, then we can choose forgiving. Another emotional one is speaking up. So maybe there's an issue at work that has to be dealt with, and to date you've kept your head down because you're protecting your job, you're protecting other people, but inside you've got to say something. That's an example of an emotional true grit experience. Or go dating. I know for some people this is huge. Let's say you've gone through a nasty divorce, it's been a while, and you'd like to meet someone new. The thought of going on a date can be terrifying. A good true grit project, if it fits all the previous criteria. So those are some examples of the things that you can put yourself through in order to develop some true grit. There are some habits required to make this whole thing successful. So the first one is discipline. Everyone knew that one was coming, right? You need, as opposed to discipline. Thank you, lovely typo. Discipline, structured repetition. So the key there is structured repetition. If you're going to follow through and do something, you need to have a plan that allows reinforcement, and it needs to be structured. So running a marathon, I bought the book, and I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to run a marathon. It's called The Non-Runner's Marathon Trainer. And it was fantastic. It taught me how to run a marathon, even though I hadn't run very far before. And it basically sets you out a plan. And the whole idea behind preparing for something like that is just repetition. And by getting into the habit of doing this thing regularly, you build the discipline around it. So you don't necessarily start with discipline. You develop discipline through structured repetition. Next principle is around focus. And that's about previewing your success. Previewing, not reviewing, previewing your success. And Mark Divine talks a lot about that in his training manuals for how you develop focus. And he gets his warriors to do what he calls a dirt dive before any workout or before any mission. And it's basically a mental rehearsal of the thing you're about to do with all the visceral effects of doing it well. So you basically do a dress rehearsal of the thing with success in mind. And that primes your mental receptors for following through. And it also helps you develop the new image, new identity of who you're becoming through this process. And the next habit is learning. So it's not good enough just to have structured repetition and a preview. You need to do a plan, do, check, act, or PDCA, or a experiential learning cycle on this. So you need to review what's working, reflect on what's happening and who you're becoming, how it's affecting you, and apply the learning forward. So you test something out, review, reflect, and apply. Test something out, review, reflect, and apply. It's a constant growth thing, not just something you launch into and bumble along. So the most effective True Grit learners constantly learn and adjust and adopt. And the last habit is called chipping. And this is about making micro choices towards your larger picture of who you are. So when I trained for my first marathon, little micro choices came into play all the time. So little things like discuss how I talked about the marathon. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to try and run a marathon. No, I chipped away at that fear by saying, I am running the Canberra Marathon in April this year. And so by chipping away using language, I started to create a new identity for myself, for someone who is training for and going to complete a marathon. And every day I chose to get up and run the distance. Every day I put my shoes on and went out the door, and off I did. So little micro choices really add up. It's not, all those cliche metaphors really do make a big difference. So it's about one step at a time and going up and over the mountain. Okay, so those are your habits. Let's have a little summary or the invitation. Pick a 30-day, 90-day, or 1-year True Grit challenge. An example of a great 30-day True Grit challenge might be, I'm going to do 10 push-ups a day, or I'm going to work out every day, or I'm going to stretch every day, or do yoga every day. I like the physical ones with this one. Or it might be something that you eliminate from your diet. I'm going to stop drinking for 30 days. No alcohol for 30 days, or no caffeine for 30 days. For a larger project, 90-day True Grit challenge. And for me, I've got one going at the moment, which is write my book. So with that, I know I need to write 1,000 words a day in order to meet my goal of writing my new book. So, and that's just and the way that I'm doing that for my structured repetition is every day from 6 a.m. till 7 a.m. I get up and I write my 1,000 words. And by doing that 5 days a week, I get my 5,000 words in, get the book done 90 days later. Cool, huh? And everybody think, how long does it take you to write a book? 90 days. That's the first round anyway, before the editing. And the 1-year True Grit challenge might be something more epic, like climbing a mountain or marathoning or dating, etc. When I decided to meet my husband, I had a 1-year True Grit challenge on the go. And it was like, I'm going to meet my husband in the next 12 months. And everybody thought I was crazy. Who sets a goal to meet your husband? Well, I did, and I did. 2 months later, after declaring the goal, I went on a blind date with my honey, and we were married. Not that year. Took him a while to get over himself and come to the party, but we did get married eventually. But we met within 2 months, and that was my determination. I put everything in place to meet my husband and have a really wonderful marriage. Okay, so I invite you now, dun, 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 pick a challenge, a True Grit challenge, post what you've picked, and then blog about it, update us on Facebook. I'm here to support you. I'd love to hear what you've got on offer. So my 30-day True Grit challenge is going to be alcohol. It's a little bit hard. Maybe I need to pick something harder. I'm not sure. But, you know, I keep having this one as a True Grit challenge and failing on it. So this time I'm declaring it publicly. There you go. No alcohol for 30 days. What are you committing to? All right, folks, winding up now. Thank you so much for listening and watching to the webinar. I look forward to hearing how you develop True Grit.